Welcome to the Published Author Podcast, where we help entrepreneurs learn how to write a book and leverage it to grow their business and make an impact. I'm your host, Josh Steimle. Today, our guest is Sara Bliss. Sara is a New York Times bestselling author who has written 11 books, including Take the Leap, Change Your Career, Change Your Life, which profiles over 60 people who radically changed their careers. She's also the author of Hotel Chic at Home and co-author of 3 best-selling books with beauty and wellness guru Bobbi Brown, including Beauty from the Inside Out. Her writing doesn't stop with her books, however. She's also published articles in the Wall Street Journal, Esquire, Town and Country, Oprah, Travel and Leisure, Refinery 29, and Forbes. She's also the co-founder of 111 Partners, a brand content strategy and marketing firm based in New York City, and she's a public speaker. Sara, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
And she's redoing her house right now as we speak while we record this.
I am. The camera is hiding the dozens of IKEA boxes on the right and paint swatches above me.
So you're so busy, Sara. Thank you for taking the time out to be with us here on the Published Author Podcast. Tell us a little bit about your background, your history. Who are you? How did you get to be who you are today? You've got this impressive pedigree and all this experience. How did all this come about? Where did it all start?
I kind of just willed myself into being a writer, really. I'm not sure if I was necessarily the best writer. And, I just, from a young age, always wanted to be a writer. When I started out in magazines, I had this idea of what I wanted to do. I wanted to go into women's magazines, and I had an interview at Town and Country that I completely failed. It was right out of college. I think I was in there for 10 minutes, and the woman who interviewed me was just like, all right, next. So like, this is not going to work, because I was so shy and awkward. And then in the elevator on the way down, I was all dressed up, and I met an assistant editor who was leaving, and she was like, are you interviewing? And I said, yes. And she said, well, my position at House Beautiful is open. And she brought me to meet her bosses, and I got the job. So I just kind of hustled my way into magazines, and then eventually kind of convinced editors to give me a shot at writing. I went freelance a little earlier than I should have. In my career, I should have kind of spent more time in magazines getting writing under my belt, but I was just so eager. And just that, desperation for a paycheck kept me very, very motivated the whole time. And I had a long magazine writing career. And then in 2008, everything kind of crashed. And I started going from getting paid, $3,000 an article to $50. So I had to kind of think fast on my feet, and I switched to some ghostwriting and branding work. And that's how I kind of got to where I am today.
So you said that you always wanted to be a writer. How old were you, or how young were you when that idea, hey, I could be a writer, I could write stuff? When did that first hit you? Do you remember?
Judy Blume came to my school, and I was in middle school, and it was just so exciting to see her. And I just thought, it was amazing to me that she was, like a real person, and she seemed very like normal and accessible. And I just built her up in my head, and I just thought, all right, well, this just seems like such a cool life. And I love the idea of inspiring people to get completely lost in books, or really transform how they think about something, or make them want to do something different. That there's such a power in books. And I saw that from an early age, and I was kind of a quiet, like a lot of writers, a quiet girl with my nose in a book. And I just saw the power in that, kind of always wanted to do that.
So you evidently enjoyed reading Judy Blume books. What were some of the other books you loved as a kid?
As a kid, you know what? I just found this series of fairy books. They're called the Orange Fairy Book, the Blue Fairy Book. They're just I just used to love those. That's kind of where I feel like I first fell in love with books. There's that kind of whole fantasy world. And then as I got older, I just really like realistic fiction and strong female voices. So Nora Ephron and Wendy Wasserstein. those, those sharp New York writers, those were the voices I grew up with.
What do you see as the relationship between reading or loving reading and being a writer?
So I think a lot of people will tell you it's crucial, and I do think the more you read, the better your writing is. I don't think I think it's really a skill, and there's so many different types of writing, and I'm not sure if they all translate. So to me, I think it's more about learning the skill for the niche that you're in. So I actually, really just out of sheer like hustling and again, needing to establish this career as a writer, I've basically written about in every genre. I've written about gardening, and I think I started with like gardening, and I covered like the Hearth Expo and new building products and all the kind of the unsexy stuff at House Beautiful that no one else wanted to cover. And then I moved on to writing about design and profiles. But I think really it's just a matter of reading a lot of whatever's in that genre and kind of seeing what the tricks are, and then just practice and finding your own voice and your own stamp on it. I mean, I'm a very simple and direct writer. I try and simplify more complicated ideas. I think that that's what I'm good at. I used to get very intimidated by certain kinds of writing because, you're more intellectual, I guess, kinds of writing. Because I just thought, oh gosh, this is just so overwhelming. I could never do that. I don't like being like super descriptive. So I kind of found my niche and just being very like direct and getting really to the heart of things.
So tell us about your first book. Where did the idea come from, and what was the motivation behind it?
So my first book was called Exotic Style, and it was design ideas from around the world. And it was, so long ago. It was like it was like 2000, I think, or 2001. And it was kind of right when the internet, this idea of internet shopping was taking off, and the idea that you could actually buy things from around the world. You could buy things from the Paris flea market on First Dibs, and even Pottery Barn and all these more mass stores were being inspired by like Indian design or Chinese design and that book actually just landed in my lap, and an editor was looking for a writer that they didn't have to pay a lot. And I was recommended by someone at House Beautiful, and it was right when I went freelance. And so that was my first experience. I think for most first-time authors, they imagine that writing, pays more than it does. I mean, it certainly doesn't reflect the amount of work or time that you put into it. I think I got paid $7,000 for my first book. And I thought that was, really low, but, you kind of do whatever you can to get your foot in the door.
And what were you hoping would happen from that book? What was kind of your vision or your dream of what that was going to lead to?
I have been kind of a short-term thinker with books. I feel like I find projects that I really like to work on, and I don't necessarily have a big master plan. I just was so excited to have the opportunity to write a book and have that experience. And obviously I wanted to write more from there. I knew that I didn't want to stay just with, design books, because the sad reality of those books, and I've written a lot of them, is nobody really reads those books. I mean, you maybe skim some text here and there and read some captions, but they're mainly image driven. So, I knew I didn't want to do that forever. But I loved having that experience, and I loved kind of marrying the visual and the text. And, I'm not sure if anyone's, ever read that book cover to cover. I certainly haven't, but it was a good experience.
So take us through the history of your other books, because you have a lot of them. Can you run us through each book and talk to us about why you did it, what the motivation was, what you learned from it? And then take us up to
over there. So I've actually written 11 books. So it's like I have to remember some of them I forgot.
So run us through those really quick. Bring us up to your latest and greatest.
Sure. After exotic style. I wrote a book called The Thoroughly Modern Married Girl. It was right when Sex and the City was big, and it was supposed to be kind of the same way Sex and the City kind of skewered and examined single life. It was supposed to do that with married life. I was very nervous about writing about myself. And so I wrote it in second person, which I thought was really kind of clever and fun. And in retrospect, it was a way to kind of distance myself. I think I wasn't really ready for the kind of exposure that writing a book brings. And that did not sell very well. So that then left me. I had a whole bunch of other ideas after that, but everything kind of stalled. I mean, the reality of writing a book, I'm always super candid about this, but you're only as good as your last book and its sales. And if you want to write another book, your sales, as you know, need to be really strong, and you need to have a strong platform. And if you don't have those, it doesn't matter how clever you are, or how good of a writer you are, you're not going to kind of get anywhere. So I ended up having an idea around 2008 for a book called that ended up being called Take the Leap, which I published a year and a half ago, actually. But I had the idea in 2008 because I just noticed so many people were having to change their careers because of the terrible financial circumstances we found ourselves in. I saw the magazine world, imploding in front of me. And I found myself interviewing so many people for my, the journalism side of whether it was Wall Street Journal or Esquire for my magazine writing, of people who had these kind of really amazing transformations that maybe they had. And a lot of them came from encountering obstacles. People were fired, or they got divorced, or they were really miserable at their job, and they kind of reinvented themselves and found this successful next act. And I just really love those stories, and partly because I was really kind of feeling a little stuck in my own career. But I had an agent at the time who he thought it was a magazine article, didn't think my sales were strong enough in books, and, just suggested that I ghostwrite for other people. And that was where I was going to find my success. And I sadly actually listened to that. And I spent many, many years ghostwriting books for other people. And I actually really enjoyed some of those experiences. I've worked with some amazing women and inspiring people. I've written for Erin Lauder, and I wrote a book with her called Aspen Style that was fantastic. I wrote 3 books with Bobbi Brown, and she has been a huge mentor of mine, and I adore her. And so the ghostwriting chapter led me, I think I wrote 7 books for other people. And then actually it was Bobbi who inspired me to take the leap back out into the world. And she was just like, you need to just find a new agent, find someone. It's a great idea. You just need to kind of find that person. And I think that's really good advice in general for anyone trying to get published. You can send an idea, as you know, to like 5 or 10 or 20 agents, and maybe, you just need to find the one that believes in it. And then same with the publishing process. It's just, finding that one person who it resonates with. And that's just so important. And sometimes it's really just a matter of finding your person. And I have a fantastic agent now who I will, never leave.
That's great.
As long as she keeps me on.
Well, Take the Leap, that was timely in 2008, but perhaps it's even more timely now with this pandemic going on. As bad as 2008 was, the current financial crisis seems to be worse, or seems like it could get worse, and there are a lot of people being displaced. So it does seem like a topic that's needed right now. So
definitely. I mean, I think, I think a lot of people think it's a book about, people who made switches to kind of cool careers. And while I think that's true, a lot of the stories in the book are people who found themselves having to change and not even necessarily wanting to change. And I think collectively as a whole, we're all finding ourselves in that position. I mean, everybody has had to change, in some way, their lives, without wanting to. I mean, we're all making all these, new life choices and decisions, and we may not want it. And we're all kind of figuring out how to make the best of it, or really how to survive. A lot of people are just really trying to figure out how to survive now. And I find when you're in that position where you're not sure what's next, hearing those stories and listening to those voices of people who have also struggled and kind of found a happy ending is very, very motivating.
Mm-hmm. So talk to us a little bit about the process of finding your agent. You have an agent that you love. You're able to get a traditional publishing deal. How did that work for you? How did you find your agent in the first place? And then what was the process like of pitching publishers?
Finding an agent is really like dating. I mean, you have to, put yourself out there. You have to be willing to be rejected. You have to, see if it's a kind of an emotional fit, if they, work in a way that works for you. I mean, I have friends who are wildly successful best-selling authors, and they have very fraught relationships with their agents. If the communication style isn't great, but it's such a symbiotic relationship. It's such an important relationship that you can't always leave. So you want to really, again, it's like a marriage. It's hard to get out of. So you want to make sure you really connect. So my advice to anyone looking for an agent is to look at the back of books and authors that you like, who are writing similar books to yours. See who the agencies and authors are that represent them. It often means that they represent several people in kind of a similar category. And then, reach out to them on LinkedIn, on their website, send them, a very short pitch with your credentials and your idea. You no longer have to be a career writer in order to write a book, as I'm sure you talk about a lot in this podcast. You just need to have a strong platform and a strong idea that stands out from the pack.
Now, when you say strong platform, what do you mean by strong platform? What's strong enough?
So strong enough is good numbers on social media, and if you have any brand recognition with your, if you're running a brand or a firm, any sort of brand recognition, press on yourself. That obviously helps. If you can also get there with social media numbers. I mean, this is what the publishers are looking for. I'm not saying I believe in this, but this is the way they're looking. If you have 10,000 plus followers on Instagram, that's something they like. Honestly, the sad thing is the more followers you have, the more publishers equate that to you being able to sell a book. It's not just your idea they're looking at, they are looking at your ability to sell. So again, strong social, if you're in any sort of high profile position, if you've done something, really interesting and kind of unique, and you have a unique perspective, all of those things are important. If you've published other places, that's great too. But again, it's honestly, your visibility is an important piece of it. And it's not something I really kind of accepted for a long time. I kind of wanted to be a behind the scenes writer forever. And I also have a column in Forbes, and I have a business myself, and it is important to put yourself out there.
And we all want our writing to kind of stand on its own and do the work for us. We all wish we could just write that great book and it would just sell itself and we would never have to push it out there. But
totally,
it's just not the way it works, is it?
No, not at all. And I've had to really develop, and this might be helpful too, I really had to develop a comfort around talking about myself, talking about my projects, giving advice. I was just behind the scenes for so many years, and I had a lot of experience telling high profile people how to do that. But I wasn't necessarily doing that for myself. And I realized, I mean, this book is just like, I love it so much and I'm so proud of it. And I realized in order to get it, I knew it would help and inspire a lot of people. And so that really motivated me because I just thought, unless I am really passionate about this and really get myself out there and hustle and do TV and podcasts and, every opportunity, I mean, it's not going to get out in the world. It's just going to sit on a shelf. And so, and also when you've had books that aren't huge sellers, like my Married Girl book, which is actually fine because it wasn't that great. But I think when you've had that experience, you realize like you can leave like no stone unturned.
So of all the things that you did to promote Take the Leap, what worked the best? What was effective?
So, I mean, I leveraged a lot of my contacts from my media days. From my, I have a lot of other writers and editors, and I sent a lot of personal pitches. I think the problem with in-house publishing, marketing, PR divisions is they have one way of doing it, unless you are the top author. And even if you are, it's all the same formula. They basically send out 200 copies to like their list of editors, and they don't usually do any follow-up. They just wait for them to, call them. I think that that's a terrible way to sell books. I don't understand why publishers haven't figured that out. And even if you hire your own PR person, there's just no guarantee. I found the best way was for me to tailor every pitch to the publication I was writing. I wanted it to be in. So I used my experience as a writer, to craft a pitch in the same way I would if I was writing the article. I got into the New York Times in a column called Wealth Matters, because I reached out to that author, Paul Sullivan, who's a genius. And I said, it turns out 70% of the people in my book are making the same or more money now than they were at jobs that they hated. And I think money is something that often holds people back when they're making a career switch. So having that info was really inspiring. And so, that's how I got in there. So, it was just a matter of kind of crafting those personal pitches. And that's honestly so important. And I think people don't realize how far that goes.
Yeah, so you're giving the writer something that they really wanted. And having written for Forbes and these other publications like you, we get so many pitches as writers. I mean, there were months where it felt like I got 1,000 pitches in a month.
Oh, totally. And you don't open them all. You don't.
Right.
You
can't even look.
You don't even open them, and you don't even read half of them. So it's got to be like that compelling title. It's got to be personalized. I always use a name if sometimes I just say like, okay, well, who is your, let's say, who's your book editor or your beauty editor or whatever. If maybe I know somebody or know somebody who knows somebody at a publication, and then I use their name, so-and-so referral in the subject line. The more personal you can get, the better, because editors are overwhelmed. I've been on the other side of receiving that. And, the sad thing is they're not always going to open that email, no matter how brilliant it is.
Right. But if you have something of value to offer, I mean, like you contacted Paul and you said, I've got this thing that is relevant, specifically relevant to something that you've been writing about, to your column.
Yeah.
Whereas, I mean, I get a lot of pitches and it's, hey, we see that you write about entrepreneurs. Here's an entrepreneur that you could write about. It's like, well, that's not a strong tie-in. I don't just write about entrepreneurs. I write about a specific type of entrepreneur and a certain thing that they're doing. And I can tell when somebody's done the research or they've looked at it for 5 seconds and then they send me that pitch. A lot of the pitches I get, they don't even have the right name. It's addressed to somebody else. And I'm like, okay.
Oh yeah. Or they don't even realize what you cover. Like, I get pitches for, things I don't cover or write about. And I mean, sometimes I'll just be nice and respond and just let them know that this is not my, beat, or never has been. Like, I've never covered, I don't know what it is, like hydroponic plants or, sometimes I don't know how I get on these lists.
Yeah. So With your literary agent, then, when you went out pitching publishers, what's that process? How do you work with a literary agent to construct those pitches and deliver those? And how many pitches did you have to send out before you got the deal that you wanted?
So I had to write a book proposal, and it was very in depth because I knew the stronger the proposal, the more likely I would get a deal. I interviewed people for the proposal. I think I interviewed five different people, and included their stories and their pictures, and having that image I thought was really key. And actually, that was something I wanted in the book. For every person, there's an image. I think it's just really important to have that. So I let them know the kind of book I set it up for the kind of book visually I wanted. And then I also spent a lot of time researching. I really outlined the entire book, and I found people, and I think I did 6 different categories, and I found people. So I did a lot of work, to prepare. So, and I think my proposal was probably about 40 to 50 pages long. And it had, a sample chapter and outline, and it explained what the other books were in this category. You always want to reference books that are similar to yours that have done well. That's all they want. And then she crafted the list. Alice, my agent's name is Allison Fargas. She's at Stone Song. She is a genius and amazing. But she crafted a list of, I think we went out to 15 editors that she thought would be good for this. My book is a little bit of a hybrid because it's, self-help, and transformation meets career, meets business. So we pitched editors in both categories. And then we ended up having a bidding war. There were 3 publishers interested in it.
That's a nice place to be.
It was very exciting. And and we had a bidding war, and we ended up actually my publisher ended up changing in the middle, but we ended up at Gallery Books, and Kara Beddick was my editor. Out of 11 books that I've written, she's hands down the best editor I've ever worked with. I think she's a genius as well. She's super smart and savvy, and she understood the book. So I think at the end, there were 2 publishers that were kind of similar in price. And I wanted to kind of go with Kara. I kind of hoped it would be Kara from the start. Again, it does have that dating feel. And she just really understood what I wanted to do with the book. And she understood, how to market it. And, I just felt like it would be a real collaboration. And we did kind of a dating phone call with 3 editors, or 4, maybe 4 or 5 editors before we sent it. We asked for final bids. And, you get a sense of what their vision is for the book and how they're going to market it, and, what their timeline is, and what they liked about it, and how they work with their authors. A lot of some editors are very hands-on, and some editors are very hands-off. And that's something you should ideally find out before you team up with anybody.
So what were some of the other things that what were some of the things that went well with the publisher as you worked with them? You said the editing was great. What were some of the other things that made this publisher, or made working with this publisher, a great experience?
Well, for me, this experience was really all about my editor and that relationship, that strong relationship. I felt like, a lot of times, your editor is kind of there to guide you from a real distance. And I felt like with Kara, like she would send me ideas for people that could be in the book. I would send her ideas. I would ask her questions about, tone and length and variation. We have 63 people in the books. We really wanted a range of stories. It was a little bit of an insane undertaking, but she really supported and understood that. And that was really, really crucial to me. I mean, I think, it's also really important how they're going to market the book. I probably, I think every author wants more attention, I guess, from, marketing and the PR department. And unfortunately, I think you just have to accept that the way they're structured. I had some amazing publicists at Gallery who I worked with who were wonderful. But, it's a finite period of time, and then you're really on your own to hustle. I did put myself on book tour. This is the other thing a lot of first-time authors don't realize, and especially your authors, many of whom are entrepreneurs. I think everyone has this glamorous idea that your publisher is going to put you on a book tour. They don't do that unless they're really anticipating very high sales. So I basically reached out to people in the book in big cities or big publishing markets. And I reached out to bookstores. I did work with an outside publicist to help me with this. And we reached out to bookstores and we said, we have this great book and, I'd be willing to have a conversation with this inspiring person in your town who's in the book. And, between the two of us, we can probably, get a handful of people there. And my husband travels a lot for work. So we had a lot of mileage points, and I stayed in my friends, guest rooms and basements, and in one lucky case, a guest house. And I went, I think, to I did 11 events or something. It was a little bit crazy, but I thought it was very important because then you get that local press and you just kind of get yourself out in the world a little bit.
Now, your book followed an interview format. You interviewed a lot of people for your book. For my first book, I interviewed 30 people, and it was a ton of work. I thought, oh, this is just going to write itself. I'm just interviewing these people. It's going to be easy. And I found out that it's not easy to interview people. It's not easy to find them, to get them, to get them back to sit down.
Finding them is really a lot. I mean, I spent probably more time finding everyone than I did writing, and then getting them to agree.
Yeah. And then you have to corral everybody. And a question that comes up with some of the listeners of the podcast when we talk about doing interviews is they ask, well, what do I have to do legally to use these people's interviews? Do I just get them to sign a little something saying it's okay? What was the technical process of how you got these people involved in the book? And did you use some sort of legal form to get a release, or how did you handle that?
So the release kind of came at the end. Maybe it probably should have come earlier, but, I did a lot of creative Googling. I did a lot of research. In some cases, I just kind of, I think in DC, I don't know how I found this florist who used to be a prosecutor, who was really a fantastic person to interview because she was always in an angry state and, turned her life around and now, has this beautiful flower business and out of her garage and makes more money and has, 2 dogs at her feet all day long. But anyway, it was a lot of Googling to find them, a lot of posting on social, a lot of reaching out to friends, a lot of cold calling. I wanted to have someone in law enforcement at one point and was, cold calling random, police departments across the country. That was the beginning. And then I had to develop a trust. I would send emails explaining, who I was, my experience. I mean, it did help that I've, written for outlets like the Wall Street Journal, and I have some credibility. And then I had a strong publisher. I think that's helpful instead of self-publishing somehow. Some people, on the outside see that and they also get more comfort with that. And then right before we published the book, I sent everybody a release form, and I had the legal department at Simon & Schuster write it out for me. We had to do one to get their images in the book, photography release form, and one to share their stories. It all worked out well. There was one guy who I had interviewed for the proposal. And so let's say it was like 2 years or a year and a half before we got this. And he somehow had I caught him when we sent the release form email. It was my assistant sending it to him. And we caught him, I think, when he was like on vacation and he had had a cocktail and he was like, I don't remember. I never agreed to be in any book. I talked to someone for like 5 minutes. And I was like, no, actually. And I forwarded him the emails. And, we did actually several interviews. And I forwarded him the emails. And I even, I shared what I was publishing and everything. And he was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And of course, we'll do this. But he just gets so many interview requests that he had kind of, forgotten about it. So, that was a process, and luckily it worked. And then on the other side of it, a lot of the people in the book were very generous about sharing the book on social media and talking about it, and even agreeing to be interviewed for press and publicity for the book as well.
Great. So what's the reaction been? How's it done?
It's done really well. I've been really, really happy with it. I have loved it. It's inspired me to, take my own leap. And I've been doing branding and marketing for 10 years, but in the middle of this crazy pandemic, I started, it was in the works before the pandemic started, but I teamed up with a partner and longtime friend, Lisa Gooder. She is a amazing force of nature, especially in the digital marketing space. And she's also been on the editorial side. She was most recently the editor-in-chief of Brides and has worked at Condé Nast and worked closely with Anna Wintour, revamping some of the Condé Nast digital titles. And we teamed up, and we've been working with a lot of small to mid-sized brands and helping them through this pandemic and helping them, pivot and update and learn how to connect with people in a new way. Because as you know, if you're not strong on digital right now, and you have a business, the traditional avenues are not working, or not really as functional or as they should be. So everyone's had to be really, really creative. So it's actually been very rewarding work, because I feel like we've helped a lot of brands not only survive this, but thrive during this time. So it's been exciting.
Exciting for sure. Exciting times. And again, such a timely time for your book, Take the Leap. Sara, thanks so much for being with us here today. If people want to track you down, where's the best place for them to find you online?
So I have my own website, sarabliss.com, no H, Sara. And I'm at Sara Bliss NYC on Instagram. That's kind of my most, and I'm on LinkedIn and all of that good stuff. And my website for my business is 111partners.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sara, for being with us here today on the podcast.
Of course. It was great. And I always love giving advice to other authors, and it's a really exciting and rewarding journey. And I always recommend it to everyone.
Great. Thank you so much. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to spread the word, please give us a 5-star rating review and tell your friends to subscribe too. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else you listen to podcasts. And if you're an entrepreneur interested in writing and publishing a nonfiction book to grow your business and make an impact, visit publishedauthor.com for show notes for this podcast and other free resources.